All right, good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. Happy Tuesday, March 14th. And to get started, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Randy Hanbelt to come up and help us lead us in the pledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So today is a special meeting. The second Tuesday is reserved for a special meeting, and we do things a little bit different on special meetings. We don't have the oral communications at the very beginning like we do on the first and the third Tuesdays. But I still like to set the tone, as I have been doing with every meeting since the beginning of this year, in setting the tone for what we do as a government entity and in these meetings. And I always end with some kind of a quote on kindness, because we're known as a community to be helpful to one another. And in this boardroom, we do expect respect and civility, but I like to add a note of kindness. And so with that, I've got another quote. This one may be from somebody you have not heard of before. His name is Roy Bennett. He's a motivational thought leader, and here's what he has had to say. Attitude is a choice. Happiness is a choice. Optimism is a choice. Kindness is a choice. Giving is a choice. Respect is a choice. Whatever choice you make makes you. Choose wisely. All right, and with that, Christina, would you please read the consent calendar?
Number one, approving the construction agreement amendment number 3 to the J.H. Jack Dan Backer Detention Center between the County of Tuolumne and the Board of State Community Corrections, and authorizing the county administrator to sign.
Okay, do any board members have any questions or comments on this one consent item? Seeing none, I'll take it to the public. Anybody in the room have any comments on this one consent item? All right, I'll bring it back to the board and entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the one consent item. I think my needs to be a lot louder at the other.
Yeah. So
Second.
Okay, great. So it was motioned by Supervisor Campbell and seconded by Supervisor Brandon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carries 4-0. All right. Christina, could you please read number 2?
Consideration of providing direction on Tuolumne County's regional housing needs allocation for the 7th cycle housing element, CEQA exempt pursuant to the California Code of Regulations, Title 14, Division 6, Chapter 3, Section 15061B3.
All right, and I understand, Ms. Yaley, you have a presentation for us?
Good morning.
Are you on?
I'm on. I think I'm on.
Okay.
I'm not off.
Okay.
Sounds quiet today.
Well, we're used to a little bit louder amplification, I think, at the Resilience Center, so.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors, and the public and staff. My name is Quincy Yaley. I am the Community Development Department Director. I wanted to bring an item before you today to review with you the regional housing needs allocation that is determined by the state of California, by the Department of Housing and Community Development. I wanted to review this with you and get a little bit of direction from you on how you would like our staff to proceed. So I wanted to start off by saying the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or as we call it, the RHNA. This is a number of housing units that a jurisdiction has to plan for. It doesn't say you have to build them, but it's required essentially in your general plan and your zoning that you would be able to accommodate the number of units that the state allocates to you. So if they allocate 100 units to a jurisdiction, your zoning districts and the properties that have to be zoned in a certain way to accommodate the growth of 100 units. It doesn't mean you have to build them, it just means you have to plan for them. When the state gives a RENA allocation, it's shared amongst all of the jurisdictions that are within the county or metropolitan planning area. And so in this case, when the county receives its RENA, we share it with the city of Sonora. This RENA is allocated every 5 years. It's mandated under state law that the HCD gives each jurisdiction a RENA. And HCD determines the methodology of how they are going to calculate what an area's housing needs are going to be over the next 5-year period. The methodology does not include populations at the Sierra Conservation Center, and they use a variety of sources and then make adjustments to that in those numbers to come up with a population projection over the next 5 years. And based on that population projection, as well as a number of other inputs, they give you a number. And so this year, the state of California gave Tuolumne County, which we share with the city of Sonora, a RENA of 4 units. To put that into perspective, 5 years ago, our RENA was 655 units. So there has been a drastic change in how HCD, the state, calculates an area's housing needs. The 2 biggest factors that HCD said that played a role in changing our RENA from 655 to 4 is that there's a projected decline in the county's population, as well as the fact that we're not a major jobs center. And the state of California, for a variety of planning reasons, including greenhouse gas emissions, reducing traffic and other environmental impacts, they're promoting housing near job centers. And so while we may have what we consider local job centers, these don't come up on the state's radar screen. And so for those reasons, they've given us a regional housing needs allocation, a RENA of 4. We share with that with the city, it's 2. So this was at first very exciting for me because I went, hallelujah, we get to do whatever we want. We can have our own local programs and we don't have to basically plan for growth 655 units that may or may not get built. So at first it was really great. Then we started talking about it a little more and went, wait, what are the downsides to only having an allocation of essentially 2 for the county? So we talked about that and had a group meeting with the staff at HCD, and myself, members of the CAO office, county council, and other planning staff. We all jumped on the call. And because my concern was that the RENA can be used to drive housing development. When you have a planning staff up here and you have a housing project, a lot of times I'll throw it back and say, hey, we have to do this because of the RENA, this RENA. And so we go, oh, we have to do it because of the RENA. Well, now we don't have that. I told the state, you're pulling the wool out from under me. I can't blame the state of why we need to build housing. And so they had some interesting thoughts on that. And one of them was that it really gives our local jurisdiction an opportunity to develop housing programs that will serve our specific needs. So even though we have a RENA of 2, their suggestion was that's just one driving factor of why a community may want to build housing. A community may identify other reasons such as farm workers or seasonal employees working at resorts or housing for timber industry or tree companies and things like that. We may have other types of housing needs that we can then establish programs for in our housing element, and then we can use those programs to drive reasons why we should be approving housing. So I wanted to bring this project before you because it was such a drastic change from our last allocation. Answer any questions you may have. The state does give a jurisdiction 90 days to essentially challenge their methodology and or their determination. And so in the past, Sheila Shanahan and I, we had done that 5 years ago. It was a minor sort of change we were requesting, HCD came back and explained why they were right, and we said, okay, fine, we'll take our 655 units. So at the end of the day, I don't know that we're going to want to write a letter challenging their methodology, but it is an interesting time for us to sort of ponder, if we don't have the state driving development, how does the county then want to drive housing development? And those are big questions that we're going to talk about in the housing element, but I wanted to start here today with you. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, I'll ask the supervisors first if they have any clarifying questions.
Quincy, and I sent you an email, and maybe this question is a little different. I'm just curious how they got, like the past 10 years, has there always been, 100 or 600 or actually, I guess we only do this every 5 years. So
Correct.
the last couple, how did we get such a drastic change? Like what was, back to the methodology?
So the methodology of the state changes based on, I'll say, state priorities. And so in the last 5 years, we've had a huge change in the state's, I'll say, interest in lowering vehicle miles traveled, supporting, major housing near transportation, near rapid transit, supporting mixed-use housing in urban areas. And so my takeaway, Supervisor Kirk, is that the drastic change comes from the drastic changes that have happened at the state level in terms of where they are putting their money to drive development. It's difficult for rural counties like ours to get, to be competitive for a lot of grants because we don't have a lot of the services. And I think that just is reflected in the RENA allocation, So I think the drastic change comes from the state and a change in state priorities.
And does this make us less, I'm sorry, but does this make us like less eligible for some sort of grants into the future? Because I mean, this is almost in a sense, the way I take it, like a theory, like we'd theoretically like you to build 655 5 years ago. Now we'd theoretically like you to build 4. So does it
Right.
really change anything for us moving forward other than it just changes what their thoughts are about us? and
So I'll
us
answer
building?
that. There's two parts to that. So the first one is the funding. And so we did ask directly HCD, is this going to end up hurting us negatively when we go for a housing grant and we say, well, we're arenas too? They assured us that it wouldn't, that they had checked with their HCD grant people and that that having a arena allocation isn't a factor of consideration when they're doing grants. Now, those are big statements that, it's only as guaranteed as the state guarantees anything that they ever say. Sure. I'm going forward with the faith that they told us, our team, that this isn't going to impact the way that you get funding. There are a lot of programs where if you designate housing over and above what the state allocates you in your arena, you get extra points. So in that sort of way, well, great. Well, we would easily qualify for that type of program. The second part to your question was sort of like, is it even worth anything? I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've never felt like the arena really meant anything because we were sort of going out and we were redesignating other people's properties, not property that the county had control over, but we would be rezoning other people's property that may or may not even want to do that sort of project. And so I've also sort of felt that it was a paper exercise to some level, that when we did it 5 years ago, Sheila and I sat down and through as scientific as a method we could create, we picked these properties where we were going to allocate these 655 units. Those property owners probably never even knew we did that because nothing ever happened and they never came in for a project. So at some level, I do feel like it is a paper exercise. And I didn't feel threatened or concerned when we had arena allocation of 655 that all of a sudden we were going to be in dire straits to have to either plan for that or provide that.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Brandon.
Right. That was going to be similar to my question, is just how much do we believe them with that? Because this is the state saying this is what our needs are projecting for this area. So it would suggest that then if we want to do a project, they would say, well, you've already met the need. I guess I'm worried just about that. I wanted to ask specifically between the last cycle and this cycle, because I think they did used to be only a paper exercise that nobody enforced. The state's putting a lot more emphasis, it seems, on RENAs and housing elements, and, Bonta's looking to enforce that. What have been the major changes that we're seeing at the state level that may lead to some of these number changes?
I think it goes back to Supervisor Kirk's question of, shifting state priorities is shifting in how they're calculating ARENA. In terms of enforcement, the way that ARENA is enforced is through the certification of your housing element. So when we complete the housing element, we have to show where we're going to allocate these units to on paper. We submit that to the state, they approve it. Now there's no further enforcement of your allocation. Unless a jurisdiction went, you know what, we zoned all this high density and we really don't want that anymore. Now we're going to zone it all 5-acre minimums, and now we're out of compliance. So it would be from that perspective that we would be out of compliance with our allocation. But once a jurisdiction puts that in their housing element and it's certified, you're in compliance with your ARENA.
Okay. And then grants are one thing. There's also a lot of legislative changes that are trying to promote more housing. Do we think that this could affect our eligibility? I know there's other issues there, but SB 9, 10, 35, a lot of these ones that they're pulling out, if we've already met our housing need, that they say these are no longer tools?
I haven't seen anything that correlates those bills that you just mentioned to an allocation.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it won't happen in the future, but I haven't seen that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I was also I think I understand well about, you explained well how this was in the past a paper exercise, and it may have some impacts on how we do business as an organization within the county. But could you briefly explain what impacts does this have on the average property owner in Tuolumne County? Saying it another way, why should somebody that owns a home, or is a prospective homeowner, or somebody that is in the business of developing properties, why should that person care about this designation?
They shouldn't. It has no bearing on the homeowner. With the exception of if you were a jurisdiction that had a very large allocation, the local government would then go in and sort of pick these properties where they were going to put it. So from an adjacency issue, you may all of a sudden have a property zoned for high-density residential that you didn't have before because that jurisdiction needed to comply with their ARENA. That is not our case here.
Thank you.
And I just have one question. You had mentioned that this low RENA would not affect our eligibility for funding for housing. So did you get that in writing? I'm serious.
No, I don't have that in writing. I can certainly ask
Could
for
you?
that. Yeah.
I would feel
Yeah.
better
Sure.
about that. All right. So now we're going to go to comments, and we'll go to comments from the public first. Anybody who has a comment on this, please step forward to the podium.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, general public. Thank you very much. My name is Mike Lemke, very active in our local community development efforts, president of our local building association, members of multiple committees, et cetera. I concur with many of Quincy's comments. Historically, the RENA Day, the RENA Report Day, was a day of huge celebration if your numbers went down. It meant less state intrusion on your plan. It was a grief-driven day if your numbers went up. That was extra burden on how the community had to implement their housing element and how to deal with it. I have, as a builder-developer, actually used the RENA to our advantage in communities that were no growth, anti-growth, yet did not do anything to support the local workforce housing. Their RENA numbers were very high. They were non-compliance with the state, and it was a helpful tool in helping us get projects approved. This is when we had city councils which were opposed to any new neighborhoods, any new growth. They were opposed to this. And here we have a board that I think is open to wanting to be neighborhood friendly, to change the path that we've been on and encourage and support housing and growth development. So thank you very much for that. So the RENA number is very important. How much more time? Last year, two significant things happened to our housing affordability. Interest rates went through the roof. Horrible, big damage. The other big burden we have is Tuolumne County enacted their inclusionary housing ordinance, which meant I have to explain to 90% of my affordable housing customers why they have to pay for 10% of the houses in their neighborhood. That is one of the biggest damaging things that we have. It applies to neighborhoods that are designed for affordability, for density, et cetera. The rich 10% of our population, they're going to buy their mansion, their cabin, their luxury thing. They're going to be able to buy their housing solution. The bottom 10% are going to receive the millions of dollars that we have set up in funding to help support them. The middle class, the workforce of our community is one paying the bill. We supported the inclusionary housing because it was in our housing element. It was in a housing element because it was on our RENA numbers. We need to fix this problem. We need to correct it. We need to finally make it right. We're the only rural county in California that's doing this program. Thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Randy Anvelt. Look, this latest RENA thing clearly shows you, demonstrates what little the state knows or even cares about rural counties and Tuolumne County in general. 655 to 4. Give me a break. What changed? They changed the rules arbitrarily and capriciously. They don't know anything about what goes on in Tuolumne County, and frankly, I don't think they care. Okay, we aren't enough votes to make a difference to them. The only successful program that the state did was in the tree mortality thing. They stepped aside, asked the counties, "What do you need?" One of the things we said is get out of our way, and they did it. And that was the most successful state program I've ever seen. What I'm encouraging you to do is ignore the state and focus on reality. Focus on what our county needs. You know that we have trouble attracting healthcare professionals because of the lack of housing, adequate housing for them. You know that you have businesses that want to move in here, GSNR and Yosemite Energy want to move in here, and they're going to need housing for their employees. Either they're going to have to build it themselves, or they're going to have people commuting in from Oakdale and other places, and when those people should be living here. Housing is good for us. It increases your tax base, by the way. Do what we need and be comprehensive. It's just not low-income housing or affordable housing, because you've got to define those anyway. You need housing across the board, and you need to streamline things. The last comment is the inclusionary ordinance. That was allowed to sunset without your review and approval as the Board of Supervisors. That's unconscionable that ever happened. Get rid of the inclusionary ordinance. Let the market demand dictate what gets built, and get it built. There's market demand, and if Mike Lemke and other builders can build affordable housing and make a profit, and they have to make a profit, by the way, or you aren't going to get any building done, they'll do it if there's demand. So do the right things, put the right things in the housing element, and make it easy for us to achieve what we need to support our community and our businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comment from the room? And we're not yet on Zoom. We still have complications with that. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the meeting, but that's coming eventually, I think. So I'll bring it back to the board for final comments. Supervisor Kirk.
Quincy, two things. One of them was when Mike was talking about the past, we used to have 655, is that what you said in the prior one 5 years ago? What happens to all those that maybe you went and you changed, you put a real high density next to something that wasn't? I mean, do we just leave that as is? Or is there any corrections to be made? Or
So that came up in our discussion, and my recommendation would be to leave it as is.
Okay.
It's also possible that some of the properties we designated, we might not have actually gone through and changed the property owner's zoning. That was something I was going to look back at. So my recommendation is to leave it as is. It certainly doesn't hurt to have these properties
Right, because at the end of the day,
designated
it
for
gives them
housing.
flexibility to.
It gives them the flexibility.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be to leave it as it is. A lot of the properties we identified were already zoned that way. Because I just don't remember that after we did the housing element that we went through and did a rezone of other people's properties. We've done that in the past, but I don't recall doing that in 2019.
Cool. So, yeah, my main question was, and maybe I didn't say it right, was would this trigger us to have to go back, which is.
It wouldn't trigger us to have to go back.
And then the only other thing, because Mike was talking, again, I know when we were talking about the inclusionary, which isn't on the agenda, but it was part of the conversation, there was a conversation about contacting HCD to see if, so has that been, is that coming at a future board meeting in near
I
future?
have reached out to HCD several times.
Okay.
Via in a meeting, asked them to help me with this, and via email, and I have not gotten a response.
Could I maybe jump on that call with you next time?
Sure,
And maybe half, she's a chair?
sure.
Okay. You want to do that with me?
Sure.
Try and get an answer. Okay.
Supervisor Campbell.
I don't have any comments on that.
Oh, okay. Supervisor Brandon.
Great, thank you. And if there's another meeting with HCD, I know that presents a Brown Act issue, but obviously I have a lot of interest with the housing
Sure.
topics in particular. I appreciate we had a phone call before this to be able to, talk about it, because I had the same concern. What the hell is this? 4 units, 2 in the city, 2 in the county over the next 5 years, and we're in the middle of a housing crisis. And it's very frustrating, because what that says to me is the same state that is saying we need 2.5 million new units, and we need 1 million of those to be affordable, says that we're either too poor to invest in because we don't have jobs here, but we can't get the jobs until we have the housing for our workforce, or that simply rural areas shouldn't exist. Everybody should live in a city, and we are being legislated out. That's very frustrating to me, and I think it's on us to prove the state wrong. What was mentioned here is we do have a number of new resorts since the last arena and upcoming. Those are housing needs. We have several natural resource projects coming in. Those are housing needs. We also have existing housing needs where the U.S. Forest Service has 250 vacant positions. We have 120 vacant positions. The city similarly. The hospital has nurses traveling in on rotating contracts to try and fill jobs because we can't find somebody locally. And as we look at projects like Chicken Ranch Rancheria Resort coming in, which is on tribal land, if we don't get those folks to live here and we don't have aggressive housing goals on that, we lose most of the benefit, or much of the benefit that we could have in sales tax revenue and them keeping the money in the community. So with that, I think we have to maintain a very aggressive pro-housing stance. I think the RENA numbers we can accept. I would absolutely agree with Chair Half about the idea of having it written from HCD and requesting that on paper. We do not want to come into a situation where a project wants to use a new piece of legislation. They say, well, there is no housing need, so we're not going to let you use this process to streamline. I also wanted to recommend that we do put together a position letter to HCD on the challenges of the RENA process. And I know this is not unique to us. There are many, every county, every city that have these issues. One that was made famous a bit was Beverly Hills, one of the least affordable communities in the entire United States. It got a RENA last cycle of 3. It's all they needed, right? Everybody there can afford housing. And the most recent one, they actually updated, it's now at 3,000, which is about where it should be. And so these vast swings both ways, RENA calculations are known to be this very arbitrary bureaucratic black box that accounts for some things very heavily, doesn't account for other things. I think we should send that to CSAC, to RCRC, and request HCD talk to them about the challenges local governments are facing with this. I think the main 2 concerns I kind of have, one of them is this is not just for the county, this is also for the city. We have to be cognizant that I think we do overall want to see growth in housing and addressing that issue. I don't know either way. really, whether that is something that's also in the city element. As we're talking about affordable housing projects or state pressure, we want to make sure that our fellow municipalities are also building housing and trying to pursue that. So there may be, a discussion there because there's a great need for those areas to have jobs, to help address homelessness, to help address just workforce housing in the area. I also want to add the kind of other part is based on our RENA numbers, we develop our housing element. There are parts in there like the inclusionary ordinance that I do agree, I don't think really work for our county at the prices as it is right now. We see that much more in kind of coastal and Bay Area places. But there are also other ones that I think are very beneficial. Maybe they've been underutilized, but the land inventory of buildable areas, right? Or looking at properties and rezoning areas because we so limited amount of land that is residentially zoned, especially to any density that actually impacts it. I would recommend that as we go forward in our housing element, we try to maybe reduce some of the burdensome ones that the state has put on us in order to refocus on some of those things that may at this point now be optional, but we should have. If we can be able to connect people with buildable land, if we can be able to streamline some of these projects and keep going in the direction we've been going, I think we'll see ourselves pulling ourselves out of this housing crisis in a much better way. Those 2,000 units a long time ago, that project ended up not going through, and I admit there seem to be challenges with it. But wouldn't it have been great right now to have 2,000 homes in a community? We would be in an entirely different position. And to my knowledge, every year since 1920, we have increased in population in Tuolumne County if you take out the conservation center. I do not want us to hit a point which the state is projecting where we are on a decline, because if you're not growing, you're dying, and that's a truth for, I think, local areas and local governments. So I guess to sum that up, I recommend we get it in writing. We got a position letter to HCD, work with CSAC, RCRC on this. We're not alone. And then lastly, we do aggressively plan in our housing element, and we use this flexibility not to back away from the issue, but to go even stronger on it.
Thank you. Okay, I've got scribble notes everywhere. And you're wanting direction, so is so
Wanting
far what?
direction, yeah. Do you want, does the county want to write a challenge letter saying we are debating your methodology and why we have to? Does the county want to do something that just kind of voices what I'm hearing from the board in terms of concern that the state's not recognizing the needs of housing in rural areas, and I've captured that? Or do we want to do nothing at all and just move forward?
Okay, so I've got comments, and then we'll answer those questions. So my comments start with looking at the memo, and in number 4, it talks about the forecasted decline, that they are anticipating that our county will decline. And I take exception to that because the trends we are seeing since COVID, people are moving out of cities and moving to rural areas. And I don't think that trend is going to stop just because the COVID numbers have declined. I think that's going to be a trend going forward, and I think we can make a case for that. So that's my first point. Second is, and it's kind of been voiced already to some extent, the RENA in 5 years, from the last 5 years to this 5 years, it's egregious in its errors. It's way too high or way too low. So I think it is incumbent upon us to set the record straight for what we think it should be, regardless of whether the state does anything about it or not. And I have a question for you that I forgot to ask in all of this. Have we asked our regional housing authority how this low number might affect their willingness to build projects in our area versus the other, it's a region, so they're building projects in other areas?
Absolutely. The first thing we did when we got the letter was not only reach out to Stanislaus Regional Housing Authority, but the Visionary Homes Project and anybody else that we know is on our radar screen of coming in with a deed restricted project. So we absolutely did that.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that Supervisor Brandon brought up the city. The city was on the call with us with the state.
Okay.
They do not want a change in the RENA number. They are happy with 2. They expressed that they feel they have been shouldering the burden of building housing for the last years, and that they were happy to hear that we had a pro-housing board that wanted to build housing, but they were happy with their two and did not want to be allocated any more units.
Okay, those are good points to know. The next point is, I think we should calculate the number of new jobs incoming in the next 5 years, because we know about quite a few, and then look at that as a percentage of overall jobs for the county. Also, estimate the number of housing units we know that we have either on the books or are being planned in the immediate future on into maybe the next few years. And also use that in any kind of communication that we might have with the state. I don't think we should just sit and be happy with the two. I think it's just, like I said, egregiously wrong. And we have a forward momentum as the county to build houses, especially considering the teachers are having to give back their job hiring notices, as well as, other better paid positions within healthcare. So we've got a problem now before we bring on all of this extra industry, natural resources industry specifically, that will be coming online in the next just couple of years. For all those reasons, I think we should do our part in setting the record straight, and I don't expect the state to do anything about it, but we can send that letter also to RCRC and CSAC and ask other counties to join in with us if the other rural counties feel like it's a joke, their numbers. Okay, so the questions that Quincy had asked, do we want to do a challenge letter? Do we want to voice concern about the needs for our rural area?
Chair, can I make a comment?
Yes.
Back to the whole, where are they coming up with this data? I feel like we can say all we want and write letters all we want, and we can do that, but I kind of just want to know, like, how are you guys making your decision? What are you basing it on? Until I know that, I mean, we need to change the way they approach these conversations, not just tell them that they're wrong. It's like, how are you making these decisions?
There's actually state laws that get passed on that tell HCD how to calculate the RENA.
Okay.
So it's way
State
above.
laws are created by what?
Yes.
Legislators.
Yep.
So
it's,
vote
it's,
who you vote for, and
Yep.
this is the result.
Yeah.
Supervisor Brandon.
Great, thank you. So looking at the number, which I think we can move forward with, even keeping as it is, I think it will ring hollow a bit if we do not submit a challenge to this. Even if we're not expecting that to greatly increase, or it marginally increases, to just lay out these specific points. And to Supervisor Kirk's point, I agree, it's listed some of, in your memo, the methodology. So why do they use the demographic unit at the Department of Finance? Why are they using Caltrans, for population growth data and in these other areas? Break that down. What challenges are they not accounting for here? Chair Half mentioned the workforce challenges. One thing I was thinking in our conversation too, they have a job ratio. Well, we're a retirement community in a lot of ways. We have a lot more retirees than other areas. They're not looking for jobs, but they are counting in that ratio. So I would recommend that we do submit a challenge. I think it should detail out more that position of what we think needs to change. I would say we take that and not just share it with CSAC and RCRC, but we try to see what's been proposed to amend that, whether it's new legislation, and see if we can be able to get them on board in their next legislative platform update for the Housing, Land Use, Transportation Committee. Where's Mark? We're making homework for Mark. To be able to get that adopted into the CSAC platform. I think they already have RENA reform more broadly, but we might be able to use this as an opportunity to get more specific as to what we'd like.
Supervisor Campbell.
A new microphone here, and it doesn't respond as well. So Quincy, what are the chances that if we were to ask for or a review of this, that number would change?
I think the number would only change if we identified a data error in the methodology that they have chosen to use.
So and have we do you see any, I mean, I guess you haven't had the chance to do a deep dive in it, but what are the chances that there is a data error in the methodology?
I don't know that I can answer that in terms of what are the chances. I have not gone through the exercise of pulling their numbers and crunching them in their spreadsheet.
Okay. And the reason I ask is, and I'll just kind of play devil's advocate here. We have limited bandwidth, and if we spent all of our time arguing with the state about things we don't agree with, we'd have no time for nothing else, because the state does a lot of things that disadvantage our community, and so we have to be judicious about the things that we fight. And so I guess I'm more interested in what would be the time commitment for that, what would be the energy that would be devoted to disputing something like this, and what would that take away, what other potential priorities or resources would that take away from? Because, this to me seems like kind of a done deal, and if I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But there are things with much more direct impact on our day-to-day operations that I would prefer to spend energy on. But again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. If that's not the majority opinion, I'm comfortable with that.
So the last time, 5 years ago, when we submitted a challenge back to the state, we contested that they included the prison population, and that's why because our number was so high. We did all sorts of research on prison populations and our prison population, and we submitted that hard data, hard evidence back to HCD, which they said, thank you very much. As you can see on tab 262, we clearly excluded your prison population. You're wrong, we're right, have a nice day. And we left it alone. What I'm hearing from Supervisor Haff that the request is to essentially reforecast the population over the next 5 years in the county because there's a concern that the way that they have forecasted it is not accurate. I'm hearing that to identify what the county thinks our regional housing needs allocation should be, so that would require effort. To calculate the number of new jobs that we expect to come online in the next 5 years, and then look at that as a percentage of overall jobs in the county. And then to estimate the number of housing units that we have on the books or that are planned, and use all of that in the communication to the state. The one thing that I have is the last one. We are required actually to keep track of the number of housing units that are planned, and that is a very easy number for me to pull up. The numbers 1 through 3 would require significant effort, either from my staff and or other county staff members who may have access to that information. And so what would it take away from? Given that this it has a deadline of 90 days, we would need to shift a staff member to work on this, get those numbers, vet them, make sure, I think it would be a significant amount of work.
Okay.
Not work that is not helpful, but it would be a significant amount of work.
And that's my last point is, if we were to do that and go through that process, what's the best case scenario for the outcome that might
I think
cause?
First of all, you're all asking really great questions. This has been I've enjoyed this. Okay. Secondly, I would say that the questions that Supervisor Haff is asking, those are, I might steer that towards the housing element update, because those are things that we can adopt here locally as new standards, or not new standards, but as our thresholds to come up with a local number that then we can tailor the housing element to serve these kind of criteria that you've laid out here. And so my recommendation would be, if we wanted to put a sort of qualitative letter together that could go back to the state about some of these concerns that have been raised. But this quantitative data that you've looked for, or that you've asked for, I think that that would be excellent to put into the housing element and use those statistics to drive new programs that we want to have to affect change locally.
Okay, so I'm going to revise my suggestion. I like that you can put those two things in the housing element, and we'll have those numbers. I've got a very easy solution for how to forecast how we've been adding to our population. We can take the trends that we have seen from 2000 until now, and then just apply that evenly. Just say it's not going to change, and that percentage growth will happen every single year. And I think that's modest. And then we can add that to the numbers that you already have, the number of housing units that we expect to build, and send those two data points to HCD and ask them for reconsideration. And it looks like Supervisor Brandon has a question as soon as you're done writing all that down.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to agree with that. I think doing kind of a comprehensive data review is probably not what we need to do right now, but having some data of what we already know. We don't have to show every error. We have to show that there are errors. And so even if we just cherry pick the few employment projects that are, kind of larger, few housing needs, I wanted to point out one thing specifically within this that it's just one that just doesn't make sense. They're talking about the cost-burdened households, right? And it says that we are 8.3% above the national average for that. That's people paying more than 33% of their income to live here. Tuolumne County is in the kind of upper echelon of some of the more difficult areas to be able to make that work. But they said that they didn't count that towards our calculation because there was no net housing production projected whatsoever. And so even though they're saying, well, you are housing burdened, you have a housing crisis, we're not going to apply any of those numbers. Well, that's something that should be easy to rectify and show that, well, we have had some projects come in, we have some planned. So anyway, I wanted to show support for that. I think having some data would be good, but we do not need to do the deep dive on everything yet.
Yeah, my main thing is that the ultimate goal, what we're trying to do here is cut red tape and make our county more attractive for development of housing. And so I guess I'm behind the curve here because I don't understand how this serves that interest directly. Perhaps you could explain that. I mean, what is changing this number going to do to make this county more attractive for housing, or cut red tape, or move that needle in any way, shape, or form?
So I don't think the number cuts red tape. I think that it goes back to a perception that a jurisdiction's RHNA number drives development. If a jurisdiction doesn't have a RHNA number to drive development, we need something else. And that can come through local, context-based housing policies that we would adopt in the housing element. That was a considerable amount of, HC talked about that a lot, gave us some examples of, well, if you can't blame the RHNA, what can you blame? And so that is what, just to be really direct, and so that is what then our challenge becomes in the housing element is to, and I think Mr. Lemke spoke to it, of really being able to allow ourselves to govern where we go, which is an opportunity that we don't often get.
All right.
Which brings me back to the first two questions, which were, this is basically a paper exercise, and as long as I know there's no money attached, which is what we're gonna ask for in writing, is what I'm hearing. I think it's fine putting out a letter saying we disagree with how you came to this formula, but again, it's law, they're following a formula, based on law. So I'm kind of more of the, don't waste a bunch of staff time. let's not be part of the whole paper exercise. Let's govern where we can. Let's do what we can to help developers, to help expand. And if this is just smoke screens and paper trails, and I just don't want to waste time with it. I think there's certain battles that we fight and there's certain realities that we face, and I'm okay with some pushback, but I definitely don't want to, we got like OpenGov and Title 17 and some other things that we really need you guys working on, so.
So
That's
would
kinda
it
where I'm at.
change any supervisor's mind? It seems like we have 2-2 here.
Yeah.
Would it change any supervisor's mind if I worked with Quincy to develop a letter that takes no longer than 2 hours to put together and I sign to send to the state? Would there be any willingness to at least do that?
I would be, yes, I would absolutely
yes. Okay.
be in supportive of that. And there again, yeah, and that's the idea that this is worthwhile and that it could have an impact is not what I dispute. I see that there are other priorities, and I think that's kind of where we're getting at. And so I feel very confident in your abilities and Quincy's abilities to compose a letter that will kind of achieve the goals that we're talking about here.
Articulate those 2 points?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that too. And
Okay.
part of the reason I didn't say it, but why I don't want to push back too hard is like I'm looking at economic indicators that were given to us by economic development a few years ago, and they do indicate a population drop. I mean, so there's a reason why they came up with their data, so I want to be pretty careful not to just say you're completely wrong and here's why. They came up with their solution for a reason. We still think it's wrong in some areas. But again, it's smokescreen, so I'm fine with you. But we do I want our constituents, I want people to know like, hey, we think the state's ridiculous in a lot of manners and we're going to push back. So.
Right.
I agree, and I'd be interested in maybe helping out with that during that 2-hour meeting.
All right. So
Great.
we've got our marching orders.
Perfect. Thank you
Okay,
very much for
thank
your
you for
time.
your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next item, what are we on, Christina? 3. Would you please read agenda item number 3? Not yet. I think this is quick, right? Oh, no, it isn't. Okay. Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. And Clerk of the Board, would you please read agenda item number 3?
Of course. Consideration of providing direction on the establishment of a county-wide noise ordinance.
All right, Ms. Yaley, take it away.
Good morning, Quincy Yaley Community Development Department, and I am joined enthusiastically by Under Sheriff Evans. If you recall, when your board had their board retreat out in Tuolumne, at the end of one of the days, we had a little meeting and talked about some procedures for putting potential projects on the agenda. And I volunteered to be the guinea pig because I had been contacted by 2 supervisors regarding the establishment of a noise ordinance and suggested that we do a 1-page sort of synopsis that I would bring to your board that just sort of outlined at a very, very high level with very little research or time spent, just some of the issues, pros, cons, how we would do such a thing. So this is our guinea pig test run of this process, and we will see how it goes. So I was contacted by 2 supervisors who were interested in doing a noise ordinance. In the process of preparing for today, spoke with our Code Compliance Division as well as the Sheriff's Office. Our Code Compliance Division reported that they get about 10 complaints a year regarding noise, the majority of them being from dirt bikes and roosters. So you have those up on your screen here. And that, in speaking with the Sheriff's Office, they get significantly more number of complaints regarding noise. And theirs are typically parties and barking dogs. So there you go. You have your 4 main noises of noise complaints. We also get them for backyard hobbies, such as, chainsaw carving and, wood carving, mills, private, little hobby mills in the backyard. So we do get some other things, and you also get noise complaints. So you may have a few other interesting ones to add to add to the list. So right now, the way that noise is enforced is typically through the sheriff's office. Code compliance, we might take the noise complaint and then do some vetting through the zoning code to see, well, is the noise that's being generated a permitted land use? And so we kind of handle it from that way. So if it's not from a permitted land use, then it's not necessarily the noise that becomes the violation, it's the activity causing the noise. But if the noise is dirt bikes, we don't have, recreational dirt biking, we don't have a way to enforce that land use. And so that really just becomes more of a disturbing the peace sort of situation. When we have development projects that come through, let's just say mini mart is going to be is proposed, or something that might have more outdoor noise like a wedding or something like that. If they come in and get a permit through the community development department, we will put conditions of approval on that project to put a noise box around the project, both from a construction standpoint and an operational standpoint. But if it's just your day-to-day kind of residential noise, that's not an area that the CDD regulates. So in looking at whether or not the county wanted to pursue a noise ordinance, there are a lot of questions to be asked and to vet out who's responsible for enforcement. Do we have the bandwidth to do that enforcement? What types of tools are needed for enforcement? If it's a barking dog and we send a code compliance investigator or law enforcement out, and when we get there, the dog is not barking, we don't have a violation. Are there repeat situations that then we are enforcing? I did a quick search of some of our surrounding counties and put up some things. It really varies. Some people have, even down south, environmental health is the noise control officer. So it really runs the gamut. There's not just a model that at this point in time I would recommend picking up and putting down in our county. It would, if we were to go down this path, we'd probably hire a consulting firm who is an expert in noise ordinance to do this. We are not. We certainly would want to work with our law enforcement partners because if it shifted to law enforcement and I don't have to do this, then you're talking to the wrong person. We would want to look at what other jurisdictions are doing, how can we actually enforce it, and then where does this fall within the priority of the work, the body of work that law enforcement is doing and code compliance is doing. That's all I have prepared. I'm just sort of putting it out there to get some feedback from your board on if you want my staff or the sheriff's office to do additional research to bring an item back to you. Certainly anytime we do an ordinance, county council's involved. So it does touch more departments than just code enforcement if that's the thought of where it would land. And there would be certainly costs to creating a noise ordinance and costs to enforcing a noise ordinance. If we were going to create it and leave our levels and leave our bandwidth at the same way we are right now, then certainly other areas of law enforcement or code compliance would suffer. So that, Neil, Supervisor, who are you? Under Sheriff Evans? Supervisor Evans?
Yes.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Demotion.
Thank you for the demotion. I don't have anything to add other than if you have questions, I'm here to answer them, and I can tell you what our process is currently.
All right, so let's start with questions, and I'll start with Supervisor Campbell.
Okay. Questions. So this has come up before in the county, I believe. I don't know if anybody in the county is still around. Well, CC would have been. But if I recall correctly, that there was some discussion about a noise ordinance, and they mostly developed one, I think, or got a good portion of the way there. And then there was the new venue on Tuolumne Road was coming in, and there was some concern that it might apply to that, and there was confusion there, and then the whole thing just kind of got dropped. is that sitting on a shelf somewhere that we can look at, or, I mean, my just thought is that if work's already been done on this in the past in the county, can we leverage that, or am I just misremembering things?
I had also heard that a noise ordinance had been pursued and that I'm getting second, I'm the second person really in this, so I might misstate it, but that essentially at some point in time, it was determined that there was the disturbing the peace process that law enforcement can utilize and does utilize, and that was enough for the needs at the time.
Supervisor Campbell, I won't admit to my age, but I will tell you I was around during that time. But
There we
actually,
go.
Chris Schmidt in my office has more historical facts. If you'd
Keeper of
like
the
to have.
secrets over here.
Exactly. If you'd like to have additional information on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Morning. I was involved in, I believe it was 2008. There was an
Okay.
effort. We did have a draft ordinance, I believe drafted after Plumas County's ordinance. In our county, it went through the planning committee, and I believe the first reading.
Really?
And the board, 3-2 vote, voted it down,
Really? So one vote away on the second reading and
correct?
no noise ordinance. So there you go. We got close.
And we had public comment during that meeting, and I think the concern was the sheriff's department did have a method to enforce through disturbing the peace enforcement, and then the concern shifted to overregulation based on existing ability to control noise.
Okay. And is that, I'm sure that draft is somewhere, right?
Sure, I have
Okay.
it.
Okay. So maybe we could
Start with that.
start with that, take a look at it, and see if we can build on it. Oh, well, okay, I'm into comments now, so that was my question. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. You can see how happy I am because my memory served me well in this case. I didn't just invent it, so that makes me happy.
Supervisor Brandon?
Great, thank you. A lever gave out of my chair, and so now it's kind of like a weeble wobble. That's why I was panicking when you looked at me. What is your process right now, as it is?
So there's a couple issues with the noise complaint. One is Debbie has to go out there and determine what's too much noise and what's not. It's a matter of opinion, right? So that's the first problem. The other problem is it's very low on the list of things that we have to do. Okay, I'll give you an example. Sheriff Pooley, 3 years ago, had a noise complaint that he called into his own office. We never came. And he had no problem with that because he saw the list of priority calls for service that we had. So you have a resource issue, right? And then you have a priority issue. Now, we do obviously handle noise complaints, and the onus, a lot of the onus is on the person who makes the call, whether they're willing to sign a citizen's arrest, will you? We're not necessarily going to arrest somebody for a noise complaint, but we will cite them. But they have to be willing to sign that citizen's arrest. If it gets to the point that it's ongoing, the DA's office, local DA's office, is not necessarily the state law, but her office requests us because, again, you have a resource issue on how much time the district attorney's office is going to spend on prosecuting a noise complaint. They require 3 separate citizens to sign a citizen's arrest form to cite for they'll actually even take it in to potentially prosecute it. So the real process for us is to go out there and to try to mediate the situation. If it's a party, we can generally get those lowered and shut those down, especially if it's a juvenile party. If it's a barking dog, my experience is the owners aren't home. That's why the dog's barking. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sleep either. And as soon as I get there to deal with the barking dog call, if he's not barking now, he certainly will be by the time I knock on the door. So I've just created more of a problem, right? So again, it's more of a mediation. 99 out of 100 times, the person who makes the call is not willing to be a victim or go through the court process or any of those types of things or sign a citizen's arrest. So we do have a process in place. It does work when we are able to get there and mediate the situation and things like that. But again, there are some shortcomings there for resources as well as where it lands on the priority of calls.
Okay. And then understanding that there's probably some folks that are calling regularly about the barking dogs. I'm not sure if you've got kind of the report out of the different types of calls, but, how often are you having, it's the same site over and over and over, calling in every week that there's an issue happening? That's a valid one, not just a, upset neighbor.
Yeah, I don't know of any that are current right now. That is usually the case where you have an ongoing issue with a certain neighbor. If it was a dog complaint, something like that, we would obviously get animal control involved. They can go out during the daytime, have a conversation with the homeowners and set some ground rules. Obviously, for us, we handle situations right now and try to solve them right now. We're not long-term problem solvers. That's not really our purpose. We try to handle the problems as they exist right now. If it is an ongoing thing like a party, maybe it's an Airbnb that constantly has people there that are causing problems, those types of things. Might even be different people every time, then we can sit down with the homeowners and explain the issues and those types of things. And generally, we get those things solved.
Okay.
Right.
And you jumped into my last question, which was going to be, a lot of the times when people have reached out about this, it's been over short-term rentals. People having dogs, they know that people could have dogs in the neighborhood. That's one of those things that can be kind of new coming in, and so it can alarm people. Have you seen that it's often or sometimes associated with short-term rentals, or has that been a part of the problem?
It is a part of the problem. I couldn't tell you percentages at this point or anything like that. I mean, and it's also seasonal, right? I mean, summertime you have more parties, more noise, those types of things. Around Christmas time, the holidays, things like that. So those obviously play a role in when we get those types of calls. You also have shooting, noise issues for shooting, constant shooting. If it's in the daytime, the only thing we're going to go there to do is to see if they're shooting in a legal matter. But if it's in the daytime, they're allowed to shoot, right? And so we try to educate people who are making those calls and those types of things too. If it's a noise complaint between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., again, we're probably not going there. We're probably going to do more education on the phone that it's not a noise issue if it's during the daytime. It's more during the nighttime that we'll actually go out there and meet with them and enforce that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kirk.
We're doing questions, right? So if to do this effectively, you'd have to hire a code compliance officer is my assumption, if you actually want it. Because I'm looking up a nearby rural county who has a ordinance. And in their enforcement discretion, it says, nothing in this chapter shall be construed as requiring the sheriff or code enforcement officer to enforce this chapter, or as requiring the district attorney to prosecute violations. These officials and personnel maintain the discretion to enforce. So basically, they're saying, here's an ordinance, but we're not going to enforce it unless
So that's what our
somebody chooses.
our current code compliance ordinance functions in the same way. It gives discretion to the code compliance officer of whether or not enforcement will occur or not. So that's not different.
Okay.
It depends, I think, on how your board how important this is to your board. If noise complaints are as important as solid waste cases,
Sure.
and we're gonna take the calls from the sheriff's department, shift them to code compliance, and we're gonna expect a code compliance staff member to be going out at night with a noise meter to measure
Sure. So
noise.
So my question is, if that's where the two members of the full board wanted to go, what is that cost for that? code?
Sure, so it'd be a fully loaded position, so let's just round it up to $100,000, just ballpark it.
for something that we get maybe a couple calls on.
That
and
code
that we already have
compliance gets 10
right.
calls on, but that the sheriff's office gets much more. And again, depends on where your board wants to focus. If this is something to be accomplished within our existing capacity, we will certainly use the part of the ordinance that says we can enforce on our discretion. If this becomes a board priority, then we would change our approach on how we handled it, much like we've done with solid waste and illegal dumping.
So we're just doing questions right now or comments?
Questions.
Okay. I got comments, but I'll wait.
Okay, thanks.
So I have two questions, one for each of you. Under Sheriff, the first question is for you. You mentioned a citizen's arrest, so I just need clarity here. If we had a noise ordinance, would a person who has called the sheriff's office complaining of the noise, would they still need to make the citizen's arrest? Would that process still need to happen if we had a noise ordinance?
I guess it depends on what your process is for the noise ordinance. So if it's a fine or something like that, then no. The way the penal code is set up for 415 PC, it's a misdemeanor. So again, the citizen's arrest process is they have to be willing to sign a citizen's arrest. We still have discretion on whether we're going to take them to jail or not based off of that, based off of the circumstances. And probably the only time we would take someone to jail is if we go there and say, hey, we have a citizen's arrest for you, you need to stop, and they say, not stopping. Then we say, then come with us, right? So that's the only time it would ever rise to that level. Most people understand that once it gets to that level, that they stop, and then the process goes from there.
I'm still confused a little bit. So,
Supervisor Half?
Yes.
I think I can clarify.
Thank you.
It will depend on how the ordinance is written, but generally, when we're looking at code compliance cases, it's an administrative proceeding. So that means you don't have law enforcement involved, and we're not looking at the penal code. We're looking at our ordinance code and code compliance enforcing through our normal code compliance enforcement process. The other thing I just want to mention is that the animal control does address barking dogs. So from that perspective, we already have an entity that handles that. I hope that clarifies.
well, it still leaves it muddy for me because in the times that I have been called and officers have come out in the middle of the night, I'm thinking of one case specifically in Groveland where there was a party going on in the Big Oak Flat area. And the officer, the deputy said that if there was a noise ordinance, he could do something, but he could not do something without it. So I'm kind of confused about the citizen's arrest aspect of this, and I think I'm hearing from you, Sarah, that we could write the ordinance in variable ways. I'm just wondering why we need to have the citizen's arrest part if we have a noise ordinance.
Well, I mean, law enforcement can always respond if there is an issue that falls within their jurisdiction, and if they need to take that, use criminal enforcement, they can always do that. But for most code compliance or noise ordinances, it would be likely through a civil administrative proceeding rather than any type of criminal proceeding. I would also note that if we're looking at going down that road, and I know this is just very high level, if we were to look at it, similar issues that Under Sheriff Evan raised, we would also have. We would need evidence, we would need multiple parties, because noise is going to be difficult. It's not going to be one of those easy things that we can go out and see anytime we're out on that property. And so you're gonna need multiple people as witnesses in a process. And that would all be something that would be taken into account in any type of draft ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And Quincy, I have a question for you. And this is, why would we need all noise ordinance issues transferred to a code compliance officer? It seems like there are some instances where we'd need law enforcement, some instances where we would need code enforcement. So it might be part of that same dialogue we've just been having.
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to be 100% either way. It could be 100% his way. That would be just fine. But I imagine that there would be, through the drafting of the ordinance and new procedures that would be set up, some identification of in some counties, the responsibility falls to code compliance. In our current practice, we certainly do have cases where we open a case, we do an investigation, and it turns out that we need to bring in law enforcement. So it's not uncommon for us to cross paths on certain cases. So if it were to be assigned to code compliance and there was a need for law enforcement, we would certainly reach out.
Okay. So now I'm going to go to the people in the audience to see if there is public comment on the noise ordinance discussion we've been having. Come on forward. Hi there.
Yeah, good morning, and I'd like to thank the board and Under Sheriff for being here today, and also for just your service in the county. My name's Dylan Bodette. I'm a soil scientist with the USDA. I've lived and worked in Tuolumne County for over 10 years. I've raised 2 kids here. I love living here. And I just want to show my support for noise ordinance, not as an obnoxious thing that neighbors do to each other or as a burden on the county or the sheriff's department, but more as a way to help people enjoy a quality of life. A lot of people move to this area to enjoy peace and quiet. I also understand that some things make noise, right? When you're working on a truck, when you're using your chainsaw, it's noisy, it's during the day. But when noise happens at night, it's very hard to report that to a code enforcement or a county entity because, right, they 9 to 5 sort of thing. And that's where law enforcement comes in. And over the years, they've been very helpful in helping with like obnoxious parties or, people running a skill saw at, midnight or something like that. But it's kind of outside of their purview, and it's a little difficult to sign a citizen's arrest for, situations that aren't bordering on criminal. I mean, it's hard for citizens to kind of find that distinction. And I think that having a noise ordinance would be a nice deterrent so that maybe, again, I can't speak for law enforcement, but they could mention that there is a noise ordinance or that Airbnb owners can mention or short-term rental owners can mention, like, look, if you're coming to stay in my rental, there is a noise ordinance that will be enforced. It can be kind of it's kind of like putting up speed limit signs. It doesn't always change behavior, but it kind of helps to kind of guide behavior. So that's, really, it's hard to enforce, I understand, but I think some kind of common sense guidelines, right? As a scientist, I would like to measure decibels per unit time, some sort of power density, but we can't do that easily. I think some standard kind of like, neighbors shouldn't have to hear each other, hear adjacent neighbors within their own home. If I can hear Jaren's party from inside my house, then that's too loud. So, anyways, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Good morning.
I too must be old because I remember the discussion. And I remember a significant discussion taking place when there were wedding venues being set up. I don't remember if that's okay. So this is just about bad manners and bad neighbors. And if you have a dog and you don't know how to control your dog, that's your problem and not his problem or animal controls. You should take responsibility for your own behavior. So I think we need a no asshole ordinance because that's what we're talking about, really. And that's not a legal scope, and I don't know how you'd write an ordinance like that, but we could have public shaming or something. So I would prefer that the sheriff spend time and resources on our drug trafficking and our drug problems and not noise ordinance. We need to do something about how we can make our community behave better and display better manners. And I don't have a suggestion. I don't know how to do that because I look at our roads every day and I don't see good manners there either. But I don't think we should have legislation or code compliance dealing with just bad manners.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, come on up. Welcome.
I know all about noise. I've lived in a construction zone for over a year on Nelson Road behind where Chicken Ranch is building their casino. It's a lot of noise, but even if you did pass a noise ordinance, it wouldn't apply to us because we couldn't call on them because they're a sovereign nation. So take that into consideration too. We've lived there for 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments from the public? All right, I'm going to return to the board with your comments. Let's see, for this, we're looking for consideration of providing direction on the establishment of this noise ordinance. Supervisor Brandon.
Thank you, Chair. It may give council heartburn, but I would love to see a draft of Carol's ordinance on that. I think that'd be really a great read. I agree. I mean, it's about taking responsibility for these things, but fundamentally, I'd say laws and these ordinances are not for responsible people. They're for irresponsible people, and then the neighbors that have to deal with the impacts of that. I know I've gotten a lot of calls, and it's frustrating that there is not at least a base level of that doesn't go into either a criminal case, a lawsuit, and just having, I'm sure, have law enforcement officers out all the time. Have not thrown a lot of parties recently, but I know in Merced, that was something that the sheriffs did not enjoy having to go to every single weekend. And I know we have a different situation, but a lot of short-term rentals up here that I have no doubt people are having a lot of fun at, but are causing neighborhood concerns, especially for the fact that we don't have really a permitting process or business license process for that specific business. They can open up in any community. We don't really have any standards that I'm aware of as to where it's appropriate or how many people can be there or anything like that. What I wanted to recommend is we do something small, tangible. I do not want to support spending money on a study. I know we have a 2015 document within the general plan, I believe, that's got the noise element. We can draw, I think, some of the data from there that includes along highways, ambient noise levels and methodologies, and I think we can recycle a lot of that. I would recommend looking at Amador. Amador has a noise ordinance that is very targeted to short-term rentals, which I'd say are most of the issues that at least I hear about from my constituents and around. It's simple, it's easy, it does seem like something that we might be able to adopt. I see this as potentially taking some pressure off the sheriff's office while also offering us a tool, again, for that 1% of cases where it's kind of severe, and just doing a very simple approach to this. Thank you.
Supervisor Kirk.
I have a question just before comments, and sorry, I didn't write it down earlier, Neil, but we kind of do, it sounds like we do have a process in place a little bit. It's not a noise ordinance, but what was the name you called it earlier where, I'm sorry, disturbing this peace.
Disturbing the peace, yes.
So, I mean, really, what's the difference between if I call and my neighbor's being loud, we don't have an ordinance, but they're disturbing the peace? What's the difference?
There's not really much of a difference. There's three different sections to 415 PC, and
It's 415.
each one deals with a different thing, but as far as disturbing the peace, that's the law that we go to
Okay.
and can enforce.
But I would, if it came to code compliance, it would be different. We wouldn't be using the penal code. We would be using the process that's already outlined in Chapter 110 of the ordinance.
The difference is we're just excluding code enforcement, your department, because it's not code, it's PC. So
That's
therefore
correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm in the same boat as far as what Jaren says about short-term rentals. I get hammered with people, not just, I mean, the short-term rental is probably the biggest complaint I hear with people with noises. But I'm just want to be honest about the conversation, which is, like some of these other jurisdictions that have noise ordinances, it's just like a paper exercise. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the staff, if you don't have the funding, you don't have the tools to go out in the middle of the night and sit there and watch and look. It's, again, I'm just being realistic. It's kind of just it's a paper conversation. I would rather see that time go into Title 17, some other things that your department needs to do. I understand we could potentially hire a consultant. Why we would hire a consultant, I don't know, because like Jaron said, I do see the one in Amador is basically mimicking, I think, what we'd want to do. But for me, it just comes back down to, if we have a process, which is Penal Code 415, I think more people just need to know about that. And I don't see us wanting to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to send people out on the weekends to spy on people who are having a party or being a little too loud. I don't want to get in that business. Yeah, you can't legislate human behavior. That's very true. But I mean, I do think ordinances and laws and stuff are there for a reason. I just don't think this, for me, elevates to the level that we really need to go down this path. And it sounds like we kind of did years ago and it didn't work out. That's not a reason not to do it today, but boards past have gone down this road and it hasn't worked out. So let me see if there's anything else. I guess for me, and I wrote these two things down, and this is me just being honest. I think before I want to start legislating ordinances for code or for noise, I'd rather us be going down the streets here, and there's some homeless people that are, urinating on the streets, breaking windows. I'd rather see us enforcing the law on people who are truly, in my sense, breaking the law in that sense. And then I would actually rather see more money and funding going towards, if we were talking about positions in CDD, more people on the ground doing the work as far as plans reviews or helping with development, or I don't know. I just have a different priority in my mind where I'd rather see some funding going. So we're not talking about enforcing, more code compliance on the homeless today, but I would go that route before I would be enforcing on decent citizens who probably just need to be better neighbors. So that's where I'm at.
Supervisor Campbell.
Well, first off, I'd really like to see the ordinance from 2008, because the idea that we'd be hiring consultants and spending a lot of money researching this, I agree with the other board members that I'm not super interested in that. So if we can borrow and steal from the past, and if there's, to me, if it got so far through the process, it must have been pretty well vetted. But of course, without having it in front of us, we would need to look at it. I'd really like to see where that came from. Just kind of looking at some of the issues and we've all had this. We've all got the calls. Just one example is up on Big Hill. I guess I won't say exactly where. Up on Big Hill, there was a rooster. Well, he was raising roosters for an illicit activity, and this person moved into a community that had been, people generally move up to a place like Big Hill to be in a quiet mountain community. And then imagine having somebody move next door to you with 200 roosters. And I don't know if I know and I don't know how many of you have ever raised chickens, but we had one rooster when I was growing up, and that thing drove me crazy. So imagine having 200 of them next door to you. And so it was the first year I was on the board, I had approached staff and our board about looking at the noise ordinance, and there wasn't a lot of interest in reviving that at the time. And so it's really kind of nice to see, Supervisors Half and Goldenberg, and I know Supervisor Brandon was interested in this topic in the past as well, and seeing it kind of get revived, because I think, just kind of at the heart of it, we're in the 21st century, and many, many communities, I don't know about most, but probably most communities have some kind of noise ordinance on the books. And it's not, and I really get the point that we don't want to start having law enforcement chasing people for noise complaints when there's a million other much more serious crimes going on in our community. But I think the gentleman that came to voice his opinion made a really good point that at least having something on the books allows there to be a tool there for people that may be renting large households, which is one of the primary complaints. You look at Twain Harte or Pine Mountain Lake are good examples. Cedar Ridge in my community, where there's a lot of rental units, and they can increasingly, I'm seeing in our community, they're coming into conflict with the full-time neighbors. And so at least that shows something clear on the books. I think people understand what a noise ordinance means a lot better than something that's a little more nebulous, like disturbing the peace. Well, what does that mean? Am I really disturbing the peace? Becomes a whole other thing, whereas if you just say, there's a noise ordinance on the books, you're violating it, and if you don't cut it out, I'm gonna call the cops, or I'm gonna kick you out of my rental. It makes it, that process easier, I feel. Going back to some of the things that I think were challenges with the 2008 noise ordinance that I can recall is the impact that it might have on venues. I can see that being a concern with people that have, that host weddings or have musical events or that type of thing on their properties. Businesses that basically have other permissions to operate, that those permissions include elements related to how much noise they can create during what hours. And that, we already have regulations like that on the books for those businesses to operate. So if there's a way we could exclude them from this, being that there are already rules on the books. The other consideration is that when I look at communities like, so there's a lot of industry and commercial activity on Longway Road. Some of it is related to vegetation management. There's tub grinders, there's large heavy equipment, and on either side of Longway Road there are communities. And so I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but if there are complaints about commercial activity, we want people to be able to do business in Tuolumne County and to have industry and to have opportunities. So I wouldn't really want to disadvantage those people. What we're talking about is people that have hundreds of roosters in their backyard. That's number one for me. But also, it's primarily the loud parties and the Airbnb owners that are not following the rules. I mean, let's be honest, that's what this really deals with. And so I think if we narrowly tailor it to those key areas, I think I really can't see the majority of the community being up in arms against that. I think it would actually, the majority of people would agree with some kind of law in the books that at least puts it down in writing, this is the standard. So I'm generally supportive of the idea of looking into this, of course, and I think the caveats on the board document are really good about how we prioritize it in relation to the other things, the many, many other things that Quincy's shop is working on right now.
Well, I'm going to agree with you for the most part there, but I'm going to add a little more specification here. I do think that we need to have something on the books. Ever since I took office, and I think I can speak for all of us here, I've fielded complaints about various noise problems. And I think by and large, most of them have been Airbnb type problems, but very close second with barking dogs. And I know those are particularly difficult. So I'm going to make a suggestion here. Right now, I know that CDD has no capacity, and you've got a list longer than that because of the goals we've already given you for this 2-year period that we're in, and that's why you're recommending a consultant. I don't think the consultant is necessarily the way to go because we've already got a start on this, but I am going to suggest this. Our next goal-setting period is coming up very quickly here in January of 2024. I think we should be prepared for that by assembling the materials that we've had in the past and sending it to all the board members so that they can review it. We can also look into whether we're going to have capacity as far as funding to be able to produce a noise ordinance and what that would entail as far as sheriff's office or code compliance officer. I know that the sheriffs are building their force again with the recent DSA contract. That's going to take a couple of years. But I'm thinking that there might be some kind of intersection there between capacity and our next goal setting session where we can do something. So I don't want to say let's forget about it. I'm saying right now, even if we all decided we want to do this, it would go to the bottom of the list and we're not going to work on it right away. So why not be realistic and put it on our agenda for the goal setting in January and do something about it at that time where we know what our fiscal capacity is and we can make a clean decision about how important this is compared to everything else that will be before us. That's my suggestion. Comments?
I'd say, okay, looking through a few of them, Calaveras is a good example. Some of them are very detailed. They do the noise studies, kind of like we have in our general plan, but it's the methodology. We were talking of the decimeter and how often is it calibrated and how is it held and what's the reflecting surface environment around it. And I think that's too much. I think if we wanted to develop a comprehensive one, and like Supervisor Campbell mentioned, for my district, it's kind of street fair events, right? It's more complicated. For the industrial use, it's more complicated. For venues, it's more complicated. I think the one that I would recommend we move forward with is developing a simple, very targeted one at kind of a Pareto style short-term rentals. I think that's the one that causes a lot of the issues. It's very specific, and that's something that we could do, it seems reasonably, without taking a lot of staff time. And if we choose to develop the full ordinance, we would do that in January. So that would be my recommendation, is we just keep it simple to what I think is the majority problem, one specific target like Amador has. I think we could copy paste their ordinance, to be honest, and I think we should be that level of laziness because it's at least just setting a base level of addressing this issue. We can always improve it in the future.
I like that idea. However, it's still going to go to the bottom of the list of the other priorities we've already given both CDD and county council. So it's not going to get done right away. I want to address public perception here, because public perception is if we go ahead with this, we're going to do something tomorrow. And that's not the case. We're over capacity right now. I want to bring that to everybody's attention. We're working on these goals. I haven't heard that it's rising to the level that we have to drop everything that we have already said are our goals and do this one thing. I haven't heard that from any board member. So it's going to be a long-range project, basically. And how we design that is what we're talking about now.
Then maybe a clarifying question to staff. If it was something that was trying to utilize, I mean, either the old ordinance, which may be more complicated but could already be vetted, or something like Amador, where we might be able to just have that as a standalone section, where it's only really targeting one kind of specific issue that's not complicated zoning uses in that. So this says 6 months to the first board hearing. I guess what I'm imagining is something that could be drafted, it feels like in an hour or two, and be done. No?
Supervisor Brandon, I think the concern is certainly staff can cut and paste things. That's not the issue.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is, and this is, as someone and also Mr. Schmidt in my office have drafted many ordinances and been through many different types of public hearing processes, and we know that once it becomes a public process, it gets complicated. And so it's not usually a simple, yeah, that's a great ordinance, let's just adopt it. I don't know if I can recall any situation that is that simple. So for us, we really need the board to tell us the priority, because if it's not a top priority, we would support Supervisor Half's recommendation that it comes back when you're looking at all of your priorities to determine where does it fall. Because it's just not gonna be that simple. And I know that in the ideal world it would be, but it never is.
Yeah.
Supervisor Campbell.
And Sarah, being the conscience of our board, you said it really well. I think there is there is an impact whenever we add something to the list. It's always, even if you just say it doesn't, it's always going to be in the back of your head that, I got to work on that noise ordinance, and that's one of the things on the list, and it has a cumulative effect over time. But I think Supervisor Half's, the approach that you laid out is a good one. Because I honestly don't know enough about noise ordinances or what would be appropriate in our community right now to have any kind of substantive discussion about what should be in it. And so I think right now, really all we need to look at is yes or no, do we want to proceed with some kind of noise ordinance, whatever it is? And two, when do we want to have a conversation about what should be in it? And, your suggestion that yes, we do want to pursue it, and two, that when do we want to pursue it? It's when we're discussing the next series of priorities. And I think that's a good approach. And that leaves all the rest of it for a later time which will give us time. We can do research on our own. We can, reassess and say, maybe this isn't something we want to pursue. It just puts that question off for time when we can look at it in the scope of all of the other things that we're doing in the county.
And in the meantime, we can maybe get that 2008 ordinance as it was written, just to review it, and that would be helpful.
So I would agree with you too. I look up at that board, and I know we've had, for instance, conversations about short-term rentals. Particularly in my district, I'm sure Supervisor Brandon's district, and you, Pine Grove. I mean, it's a huge issue with every single one of us. But yet, every time we have priorities, it doesn't make it up there, and it's frustrating for me. I mean, I have a totally different view than most people would think about short-term rentals. But the point is, some of these really important things, when you compare them to some of these other really important things, they don't make the list. And I feel like we have a process in place. 2 supervisors bring something before the board. Like, we got to have that process because there are going to be things that we miss. And I feel like we're going through this process. We're looking at it. We want to have an honest conversation. But I guarantee you, potentially, when we do this again in January, I'll bet you it doesn't make the cut. And for good reason. And I feel like if we took every single one of these and we had a moment like this, it would be the hot item in front of us, and we'd really want to affect change. We'd have a lot of great ideas, but then when you really look at the whole picture, it's like, shoot, what is our bandwidth? So I'm not saying it's not going to cut it. I'm just saying there's a reason why short-term rentals and the noise ordinance didn't make it in the past. I'm not saying it won't in the future. I'm just saying I think we got to be really cognizant. If that means having more information, looking at the 2008 one, doing a little bit more research, who knows, maybe when we do have the overall arching priority conversation, maybe we'll be more educated and be like, yeah, it makes sense. But, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Supervisor Brandon.
Thank you. And I think the concern I have is similar. The same discussion we're having now would be the same discussion we're going to have there. I think we kind of had it really briefly at the last one too. It's hard to compare this to another thing, and that's why it doesn't get done and it continues to be an issue. What I worry about is we would come back if we put it up there as a priority. It would have a study that we have to pay for. It would be an omnibus kind of noise control ordinance. It takes a lot of time, it's a big project, rather than just doing something that is addressing one main issue. And so that's what I would hope it would be in either case, is a simple solution to it, and not, and I get it's the best of intentions. You want to cover every situation, but really this is not the same level as an emergency management plan as we're going to get briefed on. This is really talking about a lower level issue that we could just get done.
Well, we can make that decision in January, that it can be a lower level, just get it done type of a project rather than a big full blown. But I'm suggesting to what I said earlier, and do we have full agreement that we'll add this to our 2024 agenda for goal setting? Do we have the board agreement on that?
Well, it's discussion, right? It's not like it's going to be one of our 5 goals.
No,
It's just a
that
discussion.
we're going to
Okay.
discuss it then, and we're going to get briefed on the 2008 ordinance as was written and be prepared for it in January, so that we might make another decision and it might become one of our priorities.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
So I got 3, and somebody's
I
thinking
would
about
prefer
it.
we do it today, but if we're not doing it today, which it sounds like we're not, then yeah, in January would be fine.
Okay, sounds like we've got agreement there. Thank you. All right, so we've got one more open session item to go. Clerk of the Board, would you please read item number 4?
All right. Presentation of the role of elected officials before, during, and after emergency or disasters.
Maybe. So we're waiting for Dory to get organized, and then we'll begin. Yeah, that's fine. Take your time. So I can fill in a little bit while Dory's getting set up here. Dory being our OES coordinator, something I always wanted to do when I was the OES coordinator was to give a briefing or some kind of a short training to board members on what to do and what the expectations are of elected board members during an emergency. And so Dory is fulfilling that wish by giving us this training today.
All righty. Good morning and happy Tuesday. Dory Beats, your Office of Emergency Services Coordinator. As Supervisor Half indicated, today I'd like to just go over the role of elected officials during a disaster. And I'd like to start out as elected officials, understanding and supporting emergency management is vital to the safety and well-being of the public and our communities. Emergency management is a critical government function from planning and preparedness through long-term disaster recovery and mitigation efforts. Before a disaster occurs, elected officials are encouraged to meet with their emergency management officials and establish solid relationships, learn about emergency plans and procedures, and visit the Emergency Operations Center and other critical facilities. During times of crisis, elected officials can be an asset to their communities by having a clear understanding of how government responds to emergencies and disasters, what resources are available, what types of assistance can be provided to citizens, and how much time it may take to deliver that assistance. Policymakers have a responsibility to make decisions that will ensure the safety of their constituents and communities. So I'd like to walk through. I also have obviously the Undersheriff here and Chief Wood in case I need assistance. They're my backup to my backup. So, all right, first and foremost, I want to say that all disasters are locally driven. A local official's role to provide leadership and policy guidance to their jurisdiction before, during, and after. Your role is vital to public safety. You play a crucial role in public safety. Your understanding and support of emergency management is vital to the safety and well-being of the public and our communities. Emergency management is a critical government function from planning and preparedness through long-term disaster recovery and mitigation efforts. Before a disaster occurs, elected officials are encouraged to meet with emergency management officials and work through some of those plans, understand those plans, the capacity, and the ability then for us to respond to any disaster that we might have within our communities. During times of crisis, elected officials can be a valuable asset to their communities by having a clear understanding of how the government responds to emergencies and disasters, what those resources are available, and how we can do the best for our community in times of disaster. I wanted to highlight it that it is really important for the public to know that this is part of our preparedness, and I'll go a little bit more about how your role as an elected official can aid us in that preparedness. Policymakers have a responsibility then to make those decisions that will ensure the safety of constituents in our communities, and we'll talk a little about what that means, including how we proclaim a local emergency here and work with the state or feds in that request. So, leadership before a disaster. One of the things I want to mention and highlight, it is really important, and we meet regularly, all of you. We meet to discuss some emergency management processes and plans and maybe what is happening. But it is also really important for you as leaders within our community and elected officials of the board to understand what those potential hazards are. They have changed, and I know they have changed over the years. Supervisor Half, as you know, our local hazard mitigation and those threats to our community definitely has changed, as well as the frequency of those types of hazards within our community. We had the other day a tornado. I would have never have guessed we would have a tornado. And having that now in our plan and the response to that has to be fully explored. So things like that have to change. Understanding and learning about the emergency management disaster assistance services, what we can provide as a community, but also what we can ask for from both the state and federal resources, so that you can help educate the community about what is available, what's not available, what we can and cannot do. We get a lot of questions currently right now in Emergency Operations Center about providing assistance, and we have some limitations, and understanding what those limitations are is very vital. Encouraging constituents and business to develop emergency plans and be self-sufficient in the immediate aftermath. We have spent a lot of time educating the community about the individual's responsibility. If we can get more of our community, individuals, homes, schools, businesses to be prepared, the less that we will have to do in that response. Also, it will aid in the recovery of our community. And so it's really important to encourage that throughout your districts and throughout Tuolumne County as a whole. Collaborating, encouraging all governmental agencies and businesses, those leaders then to coordinate and collaborate with us as an emergency management agency so that we can function smoother and collaborative. It is an incredible process, and we are very lucky in Tuolumne County to have some of the best partners, both within our own departments within Tuolumne County, but all the other partners that we have within Tuolumne County to aid us when we do have a disaster and an emergency. So let's talk about declaring an emergency. So the local emergency proclaimed by the governing body of a local government occurs when conditions become or are anticipated to exceed the resources of a local jurisdiction. Then we have the state of emergency, proclaimed by the governor when conditions exceed the control of local government. We've then passed on that proclamation to the governor and requested assistance, and then that require the combined forces of mutual aid regions. Then we get to the presidential declaration, declared by the president following the governor's provisions of information that state and local resources have been tasked and specific federal aid is needed. And then we might get to a major disaster declaration or the presidential declaration of a major disaster. This again is also by the president at the request of the governor. California must meet various conditions and provides for a wide range of federal assistance programs for individuals and then public infrastructure. So, for example, the December and January storms, Tuolumne County proclaimed a local emergency, the governor did, and then the president did file for or approve a major disaster declaration. Currently, in these storms that we're experiencing, President has only issued an emergency declaration, which means the public assistance for individuals and entities is not yet available from the federal side. And so we are working, obviously, all of the OAs in the counties within Tuolumne to push the information up to the state so they then can demonstrate that these recent storms should also be seen as a major disaster declaration.
OAs.
Yes, OAs.
Can you explain to the public what an OA is?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor. An OA is an operational area. So Tuolumne County is its own OA. And as the Emergency Services Coordinator or the OES Coordinator, I then serve as the OA Coordinator for Tuolumne County when I'm working with the state and the feds. Thank you. So let's walk through a couple frequently asked questions. One of them is how is a local emergency proclamation enacted? As discussed, your board is the local governing body. Now remember, under our Emergency Services Ordinance, Chapter 2.4, we originally had the board chair as the instrument or the designator for the proclamation. We did change that to the Chief Administrative Officer, so the CAO. But still, when the CAO proclaims a local emergency, and she and I will work through whether or not we're going to do that or recommend that, it still needs to be ratified by your board within 7 days of proclaiming. What that does is allows us to quickly tell the state of California that we are exceeding our available resources. So it triggers then the opportunity for the state to consider our county in their declaration. So we get asked quite a bit, how come we're not on the list? And this last particular storm is an example of that. We had not proclaimed right of way. We waited until the last board meeting. So before that board meeting, the governor had already proclaimed and had listed those counties that had submitted that proclamation. And then your board proclaimed last Tuesday, and then the governor added us to that list. So it is a little bit of a timing, and it really is at the discretion then. I work with the CAO about the impacts to the community and whether or not we're going to exhaust all of those available resources, and then we make that decision. Either way, your board then must always either ratify or proclaim that local state of emergency, and then that gets sent up to the state. What then is the governor's proclamation? When an emergency conditions exceed or have the potential to exceed those local resources and capabilities. Again, as the OA, the Operational Area Coordinator, I am being asked by Cal OES very quickly when there's a disaster or an event that is occurring. Are you going to proclaim? Are you going to proclaim? They are doing this with all of the counties within California when there is an event or a disaster, asking that and feeding that back up into the governor's office. Does the governor have expanded emergency powers during proclamation, state of emergency? Yes, the governor does have the right to exercise certain powers that are vested to use and also make available resources to those counties as needed. So whether it's through mutual aid or resource requests, which we have done on multiple events, and in this current disaster, we will be requesting resources to assist us. For example, we made a request for the CAL FIRE Stockton hand crews, and we could not have filled all the sandbags the last couple of days without them. We had the AmeriCorps volunteers helping us early on until we were able to get that resource request and just keep those sandbags filled so individuals could come and get those sandbags for their needs. Does the governor have expanded emergency, under the California Disaster Assistance Act then? There are benefits that are available, and what are those benefits? Based on a local emergency proclamation that has been accepted by Cal OES. So you'll notice in all of our proclamations of a local emergency, we are asking for CDAA and assistance from the state. Local agency may receive reimbursement up to 75% for permanent repair, replacement or restoration costs for disaster managed facilities. The remaining 25% then cost is of the local government. And so when I talk about policy and I talk about the decision that either the CIO makes for a local state of emergency or you as a board in ratifying that, is we're understanding the financial obligation. And when CDA becomes available, that it's only 75% of that cost, then we as a local government, if we are providing services outside of our normal, then that is a cost that we will bear as a government. And so this is why, and I know the CIO will speak to this, we're always very cautious about understanding what does that mean and what type of financial obligation then are we committing to, and then obviously would have to come to your board. So what is the purpose of the presidential declaration of emergency or a major declaration, and how is it triggered? Again, as I stated, it is all of us funneling. So all of the counties are funneling then those proclamations to the state. The state is then determining, are we stretched and are we outside of our available resources, or what can we do to support those local governments? And at some point, do we exhaust that and we need federal assistance? So that is kind of the step ladder with respect to those proclamations and the difference. How are the requests evaluated, and how long does the process take? Again, the moment your board proclaims, let me step back up. According to our emergency services, our ordinance, if the CIO proclaims a local emergency, that immediately gets pushed to the state. And everyone in the State Operations Center knows that Tuolumne County it might need some assistance with respect to this event or a disaster. Those all then get pushed together, and then that determination of whether to request assistance at the federal level is made by the the governor, based on what is being pushed from those different operational areas and those different counties. How long does the process take? It really does depend, and you can see from the December and January storms, it took a little bit for that to occur. And here's the hard part for operational areas and counties, is we are providing the service with no guarantee that we will get reimbursement. There is no guarantee. Even if the declaration has made, in a major declaration all the way to the top on the feds, there is different levels of reimbursement. If FEMA does declare, the president has a major disaster declaration, there's certain categories with A, which is debris removal, which is our tree removal, our slide removal, those types of activities. And then also category B, which is emergency protective measures, which means everything we're doing in the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, anything law enforcement and fire or roads are doing to do emergency protective measures to save life and property. Those types of activities, once we get to the FEMA major disaster declaration, are 100% reimbursable. So during all of this, there's a lot of work that goes on outside of just the response, and that is tracking and making sure that we are approving allowable, eligible activities within that time period. So let's see, where am I at? What is the process for individuals, households, and businesses to request assistance in the aftermath? This comes up a lot at the last board meeting. I did get asked this question, and I know Our phone has been ringing off the hook. We've been really trying to get as many individuals and households and businesses to report damage. As you remember, in the December and January storms, we didn't have what we would consider the threshold. The threshold for us to request individual assistance is at least 25 homes or businesses or more with major damage. So at least 40% of their household or that business damaged as a result of the storm. I am pretty confident that we are going to hit that in this particular storm because of the flooding. We have instituted a new form process. Thank you, Supervisor Kirk, for asking, but we did do that. We now have a form where we can publish, and we've been publishing out there. And as of this morning, I think we've had 80 or so individuals that have reported using that 80. Reporting that form. Not all of them are major damage, but we think we're definitely over the 25 of major damage. Again, what we will be requesting, both of Cal OES, is for that individual assistance. So those households then, if there is individual assistance approved, right, there's the public assistance side, which means what we do as a public entity or governmental entity, and then there's individual assistance. If they approve the individual assistance side of it, then that triggers assistance to those individuals. We as a county do not provide assistance to those individuals. It would be through Cal OES or FEMA through that disaster declaration. But it at least opens up the door for those individuals. Yes, it is that form. Thank you. One of the other huge questions we get asked, and obviously for you within the board and what your role might be, or as elected leaders, where do you fit within the EOC? As you all know, I am obviously increasing our capacity and our structure within running Emergency Operations Center in Tuolumne County. And we are really trying to set us up for success for those big events. And so the Emergency Operations Centers really are there to help coordinate and manage the disaster that require response resources from a numerous agencies. So we currently are activated. We do have our EOC at Stryker Court, and we have all levels of government participating in the functioning of that EOC currently. It is really a location from which centralized emergency management can be performed. It is not where the incident command post would be. And a lot of folks, especially during fires, may mistake that the EOC is the incident command post. It is not. We are in support of what is happening out in the field. Fire is easy for us to give you that example, but there will always be an incident command post from which those agencies, fire, law enforcement, all of those entities, to manage that incident, we as the EOC are there to support their efforts. We are also there to assist the constituents in the community and you, the board and the government, to continue to support the continue of operations and help support that. And that might be working with our transportation in assisting the sheriff's office when they do evacuations. It might be working our Red Cross partners and setting up a shelter. It may be setting up or at least designating the places for reunification if we need to do that as well. Different levels that we're there supporting. Currently in this storm, we are there to really help intake the calls from the public, which hopefully help offset the non-emergency calls that the sheriff's office is receiving so that we can answer those non-emergency calls and take information and then also relay that information. We are also a place for all of the responding entities. Obviously in a winter storm, we are working with our utility companies, our public works department, our roads crew, and then also those other support agencies, including law enforcement and fire as needed. So it is that centralized location. It is a facility used to coordinate overall agency or just jurisdictional response. So again, it's for all of the county in supporting an emergency. The EOC exists to support the response activities occurring in the field, and it is critical that all information on our resource requests are routed through. Again, when we proclaim a local state of emergency, and then we are also communicating with the state, any resource requests outside of the mutual aid that fire and law have already, we are then making those requests, and all of that comes to the EOC. It means we can track that. We know, A, whether it's needed, 2, if it's an eligible reimbursed cost. So we coordinate all of that through the EOC. I put this organizational chart in. I didn't expand it because EOCs can be very large, but just in general, I wanted to show you that as your OES coordinator, I serve as the EOC manager. So I am there helping coordinate that, and thankfully we have 2 staff to help with that, and we bring in others. Obviously within the CAO's office, many of our new CAO staff have been able to experience what an EOC looks like or a shelter looks like this last couple of weeks, and supporting that and helping. So it's been great to expand that, as well as our other county government. CDD has been there, public health, EMS, all of our different partners within the county have come in. But I wanted to show you what the policy group. The policy group is the 2 ladies on the other end there, the CAO and the county council are always in that policy group. And normally it will always involve maybe a representative for the board, obviously the board chair. The policy group doesn't sit within the EOC. We do have within Stryker Court a separate conference room you guys might be familiar with. That's usually in a big function. We might have the policy group. And that is so I, as the EOC manager at that time, can quickly go in there and have conversations. If we're talking about other needs or impacts or budgetary needs that the policy group might need to the board, even in a proclamation, ratifying a proclamation, that's where that might occur in that particular instance. So I wanted to show you that there is a role, and that will be at the discretion, obviously, of us, whether or not we need that at the EOC, and obviously I will work with the CAO and county council on that. But normally, board members don't have a seat in the EOC because it is operational, and there's a lot of things that are going on in there. I also, anybody, our law enforcement or fire are very used to this, but when we get volunteers, we will also run our public information line now through an office in the EOC. We just recently actually tested that and set that up with some volunteers last night and ran them through. They're in a separate room because we usually give those individuals a script of what to say. We need to be very cautious in the information that is coming out. And the EOC works directly with both law enforcement PIOs and fire PIOs to make sure that our information is consistent and concise. And what we tell everyone that comes into the EOC, if they're working the check-in table or they might be answering the phones, what we hear in the EOC has to stay in the EOC. We cannot have individuals coming in and going and speaking, outside. And we're trying to get very good about giving you information as a board so that you have those points. And they usually will be always in the way of a press release. So the public information will be routed to you so that you can have that if you need to report out to your constituents. We get a lot of media calls, and we ask that they come through us so that we can give a consistent message. And we are the ones who are in there understanding what is happening 24/7. And in big events, we will, through the EOC, leave that to both law enforcement and fire to be our PIOs in those instances. They are trained. They have individuals that have gone through that. I have, but obviously managing the EOC, I can't function as a PO at the same time as the EOC, so I will definitely rely on our partners within both law enforcement, at the sheriff's office and fire. So wanted to give you that. The other policy group functions really, again, is to support what we do within the EOC and for me as an EOC manager, and really help make those policy and financial decisions that are related to the disaster, right? Because there's going to be those questions. Can we afford to do this, even though we may not know that we are going to be reimbursed? Those types of decisions. Obviously, County Council is providing those legal guidance to us, and occasionally when there are certain delegations of responsibility or that the declaration. So we work directly on that, and that's really what the policy group would do. So let's talk a little bit more specific. And I was asked to provide, some examples of how you as an elected official can help during a disaster. So the primary role of an elected official before a disaster is that of preparedness. As the disaster is preparedness. And it's so important that each of you are prepared yourself, and your families are prepared, and that your communities are prepared. So providing that leadership and also providing the ability towards effective emergency management by supporting our planning strategies. We will have coming in front of your board later this year the update of the emergency operations plan. That will come from those who actually enforce or enact that plan. And we need your support and understanding that those are the individuals who operationally are working to help support the community. And they are phenomenal what they do. And so supporting that. So before a disaster, make planning for emergencies and disasters a priority at all levels of our organization. And that is key. We want to make sure that elected officials learn about emergency management and disaster assistance programs. We can provide that for you and links to that. But the more, and I'll talk a little bit about training here in a little bit. I think it's really important for you as elected officials. When you see something at CSAC or RCRC that is about roles of elected officials during an emergency, it would be great for you to take that. Those are great classes, and you can work with other communities that are going through similar situations. Providing policy direction when we work on prevention and protection, that is important. Also encouraging, as I stated, that all governmental agencies and business leaders coordinate and collaborate with us as an emergency services agency. Ensuring that our continuity of operations or our continuity of government plans, which we need to update here for Tuolumne County, is there, and providing policy direction for emergency management related activities when needed. And so when I come and ask for support of these, this is what I need from you before a disaster, so that we have these plans in place, and we as staff across the line, not just in emergency services, but law enforcement and fire, have those ready to go so that we can provide the best service as possible. Now, what about during a disaster? And I get asked this a lot, how, and I know many of you want to help during a disaster. And the primary role of an elected official during a disaster is support. And I know this is the hardest. This is hardest sometimes for elected officials to kind of sit back and watch. But it is really important as the disaster is occurring and the immediate response is underway. You will best serve your citizens by empowering and allowing your first responders and the EOC staff the freedom to manage the incident as they have been trained to do. Again, you have an incredible, amazing cadre of first responders in Tuolumne County, and you have to let us do what we do best, what we're trained to do, what you pay us to do, and that is really, really important. And so I cannot stress allowing all of us time to stabilize the situation before attempting to step in as a decision maker. Your role as decision maker will come, but the primary goal of addressing disaster as it is happening is to stabilize the situation quickly and efficiently. Your staff will do that for you. To help this goal, your role during disaster could consist of or include declaring the local state of emergency and in issuing emergency orders as necessary and recommended. communicating quickly and effectively based on the information that we are giving you. Trust and empower your emergency management officials and all your first responders to make the right decision, to serve your citizens and the community as a whole by allowing the first responders and the EOC staff to manage the incidents as they are trained to do. Again, it is really important that we have that it's not respect. I know you respect all of our first responders, but trusting that we are doing the best that we can do out there and we are making things work. I have seen incredible effort across the board at all levels, from those that are out, firsthand as first responders, the dispatchers that are back at the sheriff's office, to fire individuals that are helping solve problems, so that we can address those as they arise. Oops, sorry. All right. What is the role of elected officials following disaster? The primary role of an elected official after disaster is that of leadership. Most individuals think that once a disaster is ended, the rain has stopped, the tornado has gone, that we just go back to business. And unfortunately, there is a long path to what we call recovery. And we are working very diligently to work through the situation and make sure that all available resources and the long process of requesting reimbursement for us as a public agency is huge. It takes a lot of management and getting all of those costs, making sure all of the required documentation. Just last week, or what day is today? Tuesday. Just last week, we had the applicant briefing for the December-January storms. So we are managing that event and all those costs, right? And assisting those agencies within Tuolumne County to make sure we have the required. Just yesterday, we had our what they call the exploratory call. That now triggers so many days. Next 2 weeks from today, we will have what they call our recovery meeting here on site with all of the FEMA and the state folks. So all of that on top of now starting recovery for the storm we just experienced the last couple of days. So it is going to be back to back and a lot of work that will have to be done from many of your staff. We're pulling in and pulling in resources to help us with that, but it will be a lot of work. So there are some possible opportunities for you as elected officials following these disasters, understanding what the disaster assistance programs that are available. So when we get that information out for the individual's assistance, if we are approved for that, I will need all of you to help push that to your constituents and get information out to those individuals so they know how. Once we get that individual assistance, we aren't providing direct assistance to individuals. It will be up to them to then work with FEMA for that assistance. And so many individuals, it will be difficult to do because they may not be able to get online. There's a lot of things that we can, work through your different districts and other resources possibly through Tuolumne County to help those individuals make sure they're getting their claims and make sure they're providing the right information so that they can get assistance. That is something I definitely would lean on you to help us after this disaster. I think that's all I have. I know there's lots of questions, and I'm happy if both Chief Wood or the Undersheriff, if they want to reiterate or help answer questions as well. But that's in a nutshell. What we see as the role for you as an elected official during, before, during, and after a disaster.
Thank you, Dory. First, we'll start with questions from board members. Supervisor Kirk, do you have any questions?
No, the questions I had, I previously ran by Dory. So
Okay,
thank you, Dory,
so
for
I
saying
have one.
Awesome.
So let's say something devastating happens in one of the districts, and it is not the district of the chair. We talk about the chair of the board and the CAO and the county council are in the policy group. where does that supervisor, where the situation happened in his or her district, where does that supervisor fit in, or does that supervisor fit in the EOC model?
Well, again, the only place for an elected official in the EOC model would be the policy group. And in most instances, it doesn't have to physically be at the EOC. It would be in direct contact with county council and the CAO. The problem is we rarely will have an isolated incident that doesn't overlap districts. We saw that with the Washington fire. We had 2 districts that were impacted directly from that particular fire. So I would defer both to county council and the CAO how they want to do that. The idea is obviously as the chair serving as, the leader of that board to then direct and communicate with those individuals. So I will defer to both Tracy and Sarah.
So Supervisor Half, as you know, having had done this before as well, that standard protocol is always that we notify the chair and then the district supervisor of any events that are taking place. We always ensure that we keep the supervisor engaged. What we have to be careful of is that we want to make sure that we don't get more than 2 of you into the EOC at one time. So it could be that we do a rotation through the policy group as appropriate to keep you updated of what the actions are, that what are the issues going on in your district, and what are the actions that are being taken. And then, of course, the question that each of you will have is, how can I help? And then we can give you ways that you may or may not be able to help at the moment. It just depends on what is happening. Sometimes when we're in the thick of response, sometimes what we just need is your support, knowing we're doing the best that we can for everyone because we just don't have time to spend on some of that. And other times there's ways that you can get in there. So, but always we can rotate individuals through, but we always, standard protocols, always chair and then district of which it is happening. If there's more than one district, then we go down the line and we notify each of the district supervisors.
Okay, and then I have another question, and that is, what I'm hearing you say without actually saying it is board members should not just automatically show up at the EOC.
Correct, and I want to emphasize that. No offense intended to you as elected officials. If we do have the policy group there in the offset room, I will come to you. I will not want you wandering in the EOC talking to staff that are there. And I know that's very difficult. And so I just want to be very clear that if we do set the policy group in the room, the conference room of Stryker, that the board member that is there, and even with the CAO and county council knows this, I will come to you when I have issues. I will walk in and ask for issues as opposed to the other way around. And I do that because there's so much happening, and it's sometimes often very hard for elected officials representing a particular constituents not to ask questions about that. And again, we are trying to really control the information and also protect the integrity of the information that is occurring. Because what occurs in the EOC is also often information. It's not that we're keeping it from the public. We just want to be very intentful in what we give to the public on information because it changes so quickly often. And if you walk in 5 minutes and you hear, oh, they're evacuating this, and then you walk out the door and in next 5 minutes, then there's another, you are reporting on the 5 minutes that you weren't there, that you were there and not the 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, if that makes sense.
All right, so I'm going to bring this to the audience, to the public, and ask if there are any questions or comments that the public would like to make on this presentation. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. I find it interesting what in terms of what I hear regarding the public's understanding of the roles and responsibilities and who does what under what circumstances. So this is really informative and helpful information. We need to figure out a way to get this into the hands of the public as well. I'm thinking that's another action that our supervisors can do, is to spend some time in community groups talking about how these processes work, because very often we look at you as our representatives and our point of oversight in terms of how things work, how decisions get made, and folks need to understand where the decisions are getting made, not here in an emergency. And I think that's really important to get communicated. But then again, we do need to have oversight. So there has to be a time and a place for that as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Supervisors, Ms. Carrillo and Ms. Riggs. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm here on behalf of Sheriff Pulley. My name's Neil Evans, the Undersheriff. This is a good opportunity to kind of report back to you on some of the things that have been happening over the last couple of months. It's been a very busy couple of months for us. I want to publicly thank the men and women that work for us, that have risked their lives on many occasions over the last couple of months. And I also want to thank personally their families for sacrificing their time and, going through their own emergencies at home while their loved ones are out here serving the public. We've had deputy sheriffs enter burning homes to rescue people. We've had them enter homes that have been crushed by trees to rescue people, going through 5 feet of snow to rescue people. Also want to especially thank our search and rescue volunteer members who have gone way above and beyond the call to duty. Over the last couple of months, they have gone on 26 missions since January 1st alone. And these are people that are volunteering their time, their talents, their passion, their heart to come out here while their families are at home, not having them and their ability to take care of them. Second thing I'd like to report back to you is our dispatch center and the condition that it's in right now. January 5th, we had an electrical fire in our building, which caused our dispatch center to go down to about half power. The emergency backup generator did not kick on. We were operating on half power. We had another power outage. We actually got a backup generator to the backup generator. However, on January 10th at about 4:30 in the morning, that did not work again when the power went off. Fortunately, that time, the power actually came back on after about 5 minutes. We have met with CAO Riggs, her office, Dory Beats, Roger Root, and many other members of the law enforcement and emergency response community to try and figure out a solution to this issue. As you know, the part of the building that our dispatch center is in is built in 1960, and the infrastructure is failing. Part of the other issues with the power is that our air conditioning and heating has not been working correctly as well, and why that's a problem not only for our dispatchers to have to work in that environment is that we have a room right next to our dispatch center that has the infrastructure with servers that operate that emergency equipment, and we're having issues keeping it at the right temperature, things like that. We have been meeting with code enforcement, or the building inspector. He's come in and done an assessment. We're waiting for the report back on that. We're thankful for the support that we're getting from the CAO's office and our many responder partners on finding a solution. We'll be coming back to you at some time in the future with what that might be to try to either remedy the issues that we have currently or maybe move our dispatch center to a place that is going to work. And March 11th, when we had that I don't know what you even call it, that gigantic storm with all kinds of wildness, our dispatch center went down again. It went down for an hour. I can't tell you how unnerving it is to walk into an emergency dispatch center that was completely down. No phones, no 911, no radio, no electricity, pitch black for an hour. Can't happen, but yet it did. During that time, again, our deputies are out there responding to all these issues, as well as fire, our SAR members, and many other emergency responders, ambulances. They are all relying on that dispatch center to communicate with, and not only for them, but for the public to not have that lifeline for them and what goes on. So again, we'll be coming back to you with some sort of solution on how we're going to deal with that. Lastly, and not to say the least, I want to thank you on behalf of our staff for the 2 significant contracts we've had over the last couple of years that are making a huge impact for us. We've hired 7 people over the last couple of weeks. It's making a real impact on how we recruit. We're spending all of our efforts on recruiting and filling those positions. Just to give you an example, for a sheriff records clerk who we've not been able to fill that position for 2 years, we usually get 5 to 10 applicants. We have 75 applicants. I mean, that's a huge difference, and I want to thank you for that, and understanding and recognizing the issues that we were having and the significant impact that it can make to this community. And these last 2 months is I think a stark reminder as to why it's important. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great comments, thank you. Anybody else from the audience? All right, I'm going to bring it back to our board. This was a presentation for our benefit, but any takeaways or final comments from the board? Supervisor Kirk.
It's kind of a question, Dory, but maybe kind of like the gentleman said earlier regarding getting this information out to the community. I know I've been asked lots of questions before. Is there any way to put, I guess, this presentation somewhere on the website on OES?
Yeah.
So I could direct people?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I can interrupt you right there. I've asked Jerry Day, our manager of Access to Tuolumne, if he can make a video just of this presentation that we can all shoot out to the public, and he said sure.
Cool.
So that will be coming.
And then just because I was looking at the website, I saw some information on the vegetation ordinance. I don't know if it might need to be updated, but I'm thinking this summer is probably going to be a lot of clicks on
Yep.
vegetation ordinance. I'm just throwing that out there. Huh? Okay. And then the only thing I was going to say, and I think as you did a really good job clarifying, because I think there were some, a lot of people thought that we were losing authority as a board regarding incidences, and you made that really clear. We got to ratify things, and so it makes sense that when in the heat of the moment, people who are closest to the resources got to make the decisions quick. So that's what we did last year. But then one thing you said that just might help the community and also my fellow board members, working in a prison, and I don't know how it is with law enforcement, but we have what's called the incident commander. And whoever's closest to the actual crisis, they take control because they're right there. They see what they have going on. And so I think as board members, it's a good reminder to just know when there's crises, sometimes the community thinks the board is supposed to, because we're the folks, we're the elected leaders, we're supposed to be taking charge. But you want the people who are closest on the ground to the situation, who have the experience, who have the knowledge, who have the expertise, to be taking control. And then yes, as supervisors, we come in, we want to be educated, we want to be able to direct. And I will guarantee you, if I see something wrong, I will be very vocal, and Dory will know it. But that hasn't been the case as far as my experience. So in high emergency situations, like I said, at the prison, we'll have 400-man riots, and guess what? The low-man sergeant might take control of that incident, and the lieutenants who come on scene, the captains who come on scene, they're there to support that sergeant. They're there to support that individual who's there. Even the warden can't come on site. There's certain criteria. So it's important to know that when stuff does hit the fan, there's a process, there's a reason for it. Sometimes it's messy, but and then as elected officials, I do support what you guys do. And like I said, if I have doubts or concerns, I will make that known, but we're professionals, so we always work through those things. And even this weekend, giving you some calls about some roads being washed out and relaying information. That's part of our job. So I want the community to know that we don't just sit back and not follow up with OES or not the sheriff. We ask our questions. We make sure I got several phone calls from people, and I follow up and I ask, trust but verify. And that's part of our role. And so just wanted to end it on that.
I appreciate that, Supervisor, and absolutely, I encourage you. You all have my phone number, obviously, so you text me or call me or email me when you have particular questions, and I really try to make sure that we provide answers to that, or at least, take a look at those issues that you guys are hearing from your constituents. I'm glad that you brought up Supervisor Kirk, just the whole idea, and I failed to mention it, about the incident command system that we operate under, and it would be really helpful. Obviously, I know some of you have already taken these classes, but there's 2 great classes you can do online. And this is also for the public if you want to understand just basically basic incident command system from which we operate off of. And that is also included, how we operate off in the EOC. But that is IS 100. Which is just an introduction or the basic incident command system. And then there's a NIM side of it, which is IS 700. And both of those can be done at your own leisure online through the FEMA website. They are free classes. You just have to register with FEMA to get what they call an SSID number, and you can take those courses. And that would be helpful of all the board members, if you have not taken those, to take those, as well as the public.
Supervisor Campbell.
Yeah, and thank you so much for this presentation, Dory, and I believe Supervisor Half's request, so I thank you to Chair. And I just, first, before anything, I wanted to highlight how proud I am of you and of our entire OES organization, because as I've said many times on this dais, I once was an OES employee, and to see how far it's come in terms of the level of professionalism and experience and skill set that I think OES brings is far and away from the seat of your pants kind of operation that I was involved in. So a huge improvement, and just the way OES and law enforcement and fire work together now, I think while we're never 100% safe from emergencies in our county, and there is always that risk, I would say our risk is we have far more tools to keep our community safe than we ever had in the past. And so hopefully people can kind of take heart in that. But the other thing that I've been kind of thinking about while you've been talking is how, what the role of the Board of Supervisors is compared to the sheriff or the fire chief or OES. Our job is to be a deliberative policy body, and that's by design. You don't want to have policy and the local concept of what your community is. You don't want that to shift really drastically from one year to another or from one elected official to another, because we're all temporary here. And that's why, I mean, for example, we were just talking about reviving a ordinance that was talked about 15 years ago. So we, by design, the Board of Supervisors operates slow. And I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. It's not a good thing when you talk about an emergency where you have to make decisions within the span of minutes or hours or a day. And so that's why I feel very comfortable that, with the sheriff, the fire chief, and our public works director and our roads crews too. I think a lot of people don't realize that they are classified as first responders, our road workers, which I think they proved it through the storm that they operate at that level. So I feel very comfortable that in an emergency situation, our county is in very good hands, and I'm here to support in any way possible and stay out of the way as much as possible. Because, you make a very good point that we can come in and out of a situation at the EOC, and it's not hiding information. Sometimes the OES can be cagey about the details of an incident, and the reason for that is we just don't know. And I think in this culture we have now, where people are used to immediate information at their fingertips, that's a difficult pill to swallow, is that in an emergency situation, you're just not going to know all of the details about what's going on, and you kind of just have to accept it and do the best you can with the information you have. And by putting information out that isn't properly vetted, it can actually have a negative impact. So take that to heart, and I really appreciate the information, and I think it's a good thing for our community to be involved in this conversation as well, because, we can't rely on government to save us in an emergency in many situations. We have to take agency over our own safety and be prepared, and I think, you've talked to to this board many times about the tools that OES makes available for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our undersheriff as well. I really appreciate the information you shared.
And my final comments are this. First of all, we all know we've been planning for this presentation since the beginning of this year. I was expecting it to be pre-fire to get us in preparation for fire, but little did we know all of these events would have taken place. So it's very timely, and thank you for your presentation. I think it's important to be aware, our board to be aware that there could be a circumstance where we call a special board meeting to declare an emergency right away. I know with the latest storms, that's what Mariposa did. They called a special emergency meeting. We decided we could wait until the Tuesday, but there may be some occasion with a worse disaster where we have to do it immediately. So just to be aware of that. And it is less messy, Supervisor Kirk, when we all are aware of our roles. So that was the intention for today's training. And kind of a fun observation, we need to remember to treat the EOC like Las Vegas, right? What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Well, we can use the same thing for the EOC. And I think, let's see, I thought I had one more comment. There is a FEMA training also, the IS 908.
Yes, correct.
That is specifically, I have it pulled up here, that's specifically for public officials, for the county, city, or the town. So I would encourage us all to look at that as well as far as further training that goes beyond just today. And anything else you need from us?
Not at this time.
All right.
I'm going to go back to the EOC.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, we've got one last thing on the agenda, and that involves a closed session item. So, Clerk, if you would please read the closed session item.
Closed session conference with legal counsel existing litigation. Authority Government Code Section 54956.9D1, Jane Doe 7033 versus Tuolumne County et al., Tuolumne County Superior Court, case number CV 64763.
And I'm going to ask if there's any member of the public that has any comments that they'd like to make on this closed session item. Not seeing one, I'll bring it back. Do we expect to report out on this?
Yes.
Okay, so we will report out on this at 1:30 before. Oh, we don't have a 1:30 appointment. Okay, so we'll report out on this immediately after the closed session closes. Thank you. All right, welcome back. So for agenda item number 5 regarding existing litigation, Supervisor Brandon moved and Supervisor Campbell seconded by a vote of 4-0-1 with Supervisor David Goldenberg absent. The board approved the county council to defend the county in the matter of Jane Doe 7033 versus Tuolumne County et al. Tuolumne County Superior Court, case number CV 64763, a personal injury action arising out of the alleged sexual misconduct incidents by a county contractor in the 1990s. The board approved submittal of the matter for determination of insurance coverage and tender of defense to PRISM, and the board approved a retainer agreement with Dominic Spinelli of Spinelli, Donald, and Knott to represent the county. And that concludes our meeting today at 12:12. Thank you.